Welcome to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. On today's show, Jim Callis from MLB Pipeline joins us to preview the MLB Draft and to take a look at some players already in the Mets system. We break down the week that was, including big series wins over the Brewers and the Yankees, as the Mets appear to be out of their funk. So subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch on SMY's YouTube channel or wherever you get your shows. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Taking a Cadillac is more than just taking a drive. Discover which Cadillac is right for you and elevate every journey. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer. I'm your host, Connor Rogers, joined as always by my co-host, Joe DeMeo. And the week that was for the Mets, 4-2 since the last podcast. Finally feeling good off a big-time week here, Joe. The Mets not only handled the Brewers after a tough start to a doubleheader, but then, in surprising fashion, they win 2 out of 3 against the Yankees, considering how their pitching was lined up. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Connor. And your energy on that cold open, you could just feel that it's time for a different
it's a little
show.
different.
A little different. You know, a couple off weeks there for the Mets, you know, doing the podcast. We have to tell it like it is, and we're unhappy Met fans. But coming back and having the week that they did just brings the vibes back up, and we're going to get into what's coming this week, which may include some of those reinforcements that we've talked about for a while. So things are definitely trending back in the direction that we would like to see in Queens.
Yeah, if you've consistently listened to this podcast throughout this season, there's kind of been a theme over the last, I'd say, 2.5 weeks, essentially, where, Joe, we've been sitting here and going, listen, you can't have a 3-13 stretch, but you don't need to play at the pace that they were, you know, out of the gate this season. You just kind of, I know, Joe, you love to say hold serve on this podcast. And really, the Mets, we just needed them to play 500 baseball, but that's easier said than done when you look at all the injuries they've had. But the reason we've kind of preached, can you hover around, can you tread water, is because there are so many reinforcements on the way. And it's not just Jesse Winker for the lineup, but obviously on the front end of the rotation with Sean Manaea and Kodai Senga. But going into this week, Joe, we knew it was going to be really tough. The Brewers had been playing their best baseball all season going into that series, and you would think after how things ended for them in the playoffs last year against the Mets, there'd be a little bit of fire under them. But the Mets handled them really well in 2 of those 3 games, and you could make the argument that the Mets had a very good chance of winning that opener against the doubleheader, just some tough mistakes that they bounced back from. And then the way the Subway Series was lined up, of course, where I mean, we did the podcast, and besides Frankie Montas on Saturday being the penciled-in starter, we didn't know how things would look Friday or Sunday. The Mets opt to not get both their youngsters in AAA off track, and Nolan McLean and Brandon Sproat. They wanted them to continue their development and their developmental trajectory. And the Mets go with essentially spot starter bullpen games Friday and Sunday. The fact that they were able to win the one on Friday, I think this Mets team just had a little bit of a different fire in them the entire week. It felt like Brandon Nimmo's first grand slam. He had 2 grand slams throughout the week. His first grand slam kind of got the demons off the Mets' shoulders, where it just felt like nothing was going right for them, and then everything went right for them all at once. So we're going to talk a lot of Brandon Nimmo to start here, Joe, but the Mets overcome huge pitching obstacles to go 4-2 on our podcast week.
It shows what this team is capable of doing. And if you go back to the Milwaukee series, I know we're going to focus a lot more on the Yankee series because it's a Subway Series and a lot more recent.
And it felt big.
Yeah, and it felt big, 100%. And the Brewers, you lose game 1 of the doubleheader with Freddie Peralta, and they're sending out Jacob Misiorowski for game 2. And if you know about Jacob Misiorowski, like, this is the guy that has taken the major leagues by storm since he's come up. And I was like, all right, well, hopefully they could get 1 out of 3. That would be wonderful to not get swept this series. And the Mets knocked Misiorowski around a little bit, back-to-back home runs with Nimmo and Lindor, with that lineup switch where they moved Lindor down to the 2 spot, and then pulling off the series win against Milwaukee, as you said. Just a hot team, was impressive. And then the Yankee series, we didn't know what was going on pitching, and I was asking around, and a lot of people were asking me, or telling me, I should say, that Brandon Sproat or Nolan McLean need to make the starts, as if I have the power to make that happen. Mets opt not to do it. Justin Hageman, all things considered, did fine on
He
Friday.
gave him a shot.
Yeah, he gave him a shot. He was okay. And, Reed Garrett deserves all the credit in the world because this is a guy that got out for the first month and a half, 2 months of the season, was one of the best relievers in the sport. And you could have said candidate for All-Star game. And now the last month, he's been poor. It's been a real struggle for Reed Garrett, and be able to get out there, not only have a good first inning, but then to say, I'll take the ball the second inning and finish off the game. So big shout out to him. And Saturday, that was the fun game, right? Carlos Rodon, a guy that we've talked about on this podcast since he was a free agent, and not a guy that we particularly had interest in the Mets having. So having the Mets being able to kind of tee off on him in a little bit was enjoyable. And my favorite part of it, Connor, Nimmo hits the grand slam. Boy, does that wipe away the fact that I was ready to come on this podcast and complain that Juan Soto was bunting in the first inning of a game. But a good series for the Mets. And Sunday's game, we could call it what it was, a bullpen game, a maybe not try very, very hard game, not a punt game because they put out a real lineup and there's no actual punting. But I think after the Mets pulled off the first 2 wins against the Yankees, Sunday's game was as gravy a game as ever been. That it's just, okay, we'll see what we can pull off. And they were dang close to pulling it off too.
I mean, the reality is with Sunday, and every Met fan knows this, and I think a lot of Yankee fans know this. That's why there was a lot of pressure on them in that game. I mean, the Mets are throwing guys off the street, essentially, in multiple innings of this game. And shout out to Chris Davinsky, who, I mean, I think the Mets, honestly, and that's a feel game, but I bet before that game, because Davinsky had already thrown in the series, they were thinking he's going to open for an inning. And he was so good that he gave them 2 innings. But, you can only catch lightning in a bottle in those situations, Joe, so many times that some of the guys that they had to pitch in that game that, hint, hint, are not going to be on this roster in September. They're not going to be on this roster in August. They might not be in this roster after the break.
Connor, will you have fond memories of the Zach Pop game? That's really, I think that's really what it comes down to. And you know what? On Sunday, not to take over your point, Rico Garcia looked actually good.
Right. That's what I'm saying, though.
So good for him.
The Mets were in that game, and they needed to keep pace offensively of what they did Friday and Saturday, which was against Max Fried, extremely unlikely. And credit to the Mets for knocking Fried out after 5 innings, with the reality that, like, you get the Hayden Singer double play that while it brought in a run, it kind of killed an inning right there. And, Bellinger makes a great play later on the double play where they double up Lindor that, every Yankee fan was furious Jason Dominguez wasn't in the lineup that day. If Jason Dominguez is in left field, that could be an inside the park home run for Juan Soto with how he's played left field. So the Mets, they gave it a good shot on Sunday, and just their hands were kind of tied with the guys that they had to throw. Though, shout out to you, Joe. It's a good call out. Like, a lot of those guys, at least gave the Mets a shot. But the big talking point, I think, to kick off this week, at least for me, because this is a player that I love, but I have called it like I saw it after the second half of last year, which was scary. But guys have bad halves in the sport. It happens all the time. But when you combine the second half of last year for Brandon Nimmo, and then you added in, the first 30 games out of the gate this year, where he had a sub 700 OPS, and the on base percentage was 258, which, I mean, Brandon Nimmo, Mr. On Base, 258. I started to kind of pull the alarm here, Joe, of like, is Brandon Nimmo just aging, or is he not healthy? Is he not the player we need him to be as the 2-hitter or the 5-hitter on any given day? And then you get to May, a 762 OPS, trending in the right direction, but still not Brandon Nimmo. Like, this is a guy that's going to be in the 800s when he's going, his OPS. Finishes June with an 879 OPS and that on-base percentage back up to 360. And then just comes out of the gate in July, Joe, on fire, where his OPS in 6 games is over 1,000. He's hit 3 home runs already. You see him hit left on left. He's starting to draw some walks again. But the reality is, Joe, if Brandon Nimmo is back to the player that we know he could be, it just completely changes the identity of the Mets offense. Because the whole theme of last week's show was, when are Lindor, Alonso, and Soto all going to be going at the same time? Because I don't think you can. I think it'll be really tough to beat the Mets when all 3 of them are going. But you don't need all three of them going at the same time if Brandon Nimmo is the true fourth guy. It's not the big three, it's the big four. And I started to lose a little confidence, admittedly, in Nimmo being grouped in with those guys. With the last 35 games for Nimmo, he is absolutely grouped in with those guys right now, Joe. It changes everything if he can keep it going.
Brandon Nimmo right now, this is the hitter that the Mets were telling us without telling us what he's capable of being.
Right.
And we had questions about the approach, and we had questions about a lot of things. But Connor, you mentioned the last 35 or so games. I think it's 34 games since May 31st. Nimmo has a 930 OPS with 10 home runs, 25 RBIs, and 8 stolen bases. And I think he's still not walking like Brandon Nimmo used to, but he is being smartly selective and smartly aggressive at the plate. He's willing to take walks and work counts more so than he was the first 30 games or so of the season. But he's also knowing what pitches to attack, and he's being aggressive on first pitch fastballs. Against Carlos Rodon, he's behind. Rodon makes a mistake, and Nimmo made him pay. And it felt like early in the season, Nimmo wouldn't make pitchers pay for mistakes, and now he is. Do I think this model of this version of Brandon Nimmo is going to be consistent all year long, year over year? Maybe not. I think what we have to think here with Nimmo is that he's going to be streaky at times, maybe a little more so than you would be accustomed to. You just need the streaks to not be, 930 OPS for a month and 670 OPS for a month. Let's find the middle ground, as you said,
right.
Be in that 800 range. But look, Brandon Nimmo has been huge since the end of May, especially with, Lindor going through some struggles. And Pete, even though you look at Pete's numbers, it doesn't feel like he had as good of a June as he did, like statistically. And he seems to be coming out of it. And Juan Soto has been amazing. And as you said, you get to 4 deep. And you have Jeff McNeil making a bit of an impact. Maybe you're 5 deep. Now you're getting closer to being that lineup that you need to be a contender to make it deep in the playoffs in the National League.
Right. You really need the buzzsaw 1 to 5. And then you need, at least average play after that. And we've had our conversations, and this is probably a show to tuck those away for a moment. But when we get closer to the deadline, we're going to continue our conversations that it'd be nice if the Mets got an everyday center fielder, and it upgrades you in 2 areas, because Tyrone Taylor is an amazing 4th outfielder and defensive replacement guy with some sprint speed, while you get a little bit more of an offensive impact out of an everyday center fielder. When Francisco Alvarez eventually makes his way back, is he going to be, not necessarily Alvarez that's hitting 25 home runs, but better than what Luis Torrens and Hayden Sanger give you right now offensively? You sure hope so. And then Mark Vientos. I mean, I think you have to realize that Mark Vientos of last year is not making an appearance anytime soon, but he's got to be better than this. He just doesn't look like a major leaguer right now, and we know he's such a better player than that. And Jesse Winker, obviously, coming back and being able to handle the DH days against a lot of righties is going to give this offense a little boost as well, because I thought Winker was a guy that did a good job, not only hitting with pop at times last year, but especially before the Mets traded for him for the Nationals. He was phenomenal at getting on base, and maybe he could find that as well. But yeah, lengthening the lineup, and Nimmo has just been such a spark for this team right now. And you brought up Juan Soto, Joe. It kind of brings us to the All-Star conversation. So Edwin Diaz, an All-Star. Pete Alonso, an All-Star. Obviously, we know about Francisco Lindor as well. That had already been announced. But congrats to these guys. They've all been absolutely incredible. Pete Alonso, thank God he's been back, and having this kind of season with the Mets has been amazing to see. Diaz looks back to the pre-injury form of Diaz, which is not shocking considering how long it takes to recover from that injury. But man, it's been a big boost for the Mets to close games. But bigger than all of these storylines, Joe, is that Juan Soto is not an all-star. And I'm not going to sit here and give some furious rant or do this or that. The bottom line is, this is the perfect encapsulation of how much of a joke this entire event has become. And it really bums me out, because I don't know, I could probably speak for you, knowing you as well as I do. The MLB All-Star Game was one of the peak sporting events of the year for me as a kid. And I'm calling that alongside every sporting event. You think of, you have the obvious heavy hitters, the Super Bowl, because it's one game, the NFL draft, a little bit obvious reasons for me. But I'm talking about sports fan wide. Everybody was obsessed with All-Star Week, with the Derby and the actual game. The players wearing their uniforms, all of that superstar talent on the same field and playing really, really hard against each other. I understand why the league wants a representative from every team to a degree, but you not having Juan Soto there, Juan Soto's OPS, which is 100 points higher than Fernando Tatis, and it's probably in a week going to be way more than just 100 points right now. And it's not just he's better than one guy on the roster, he's better than a lot of guys on this roster. It's just, I think the league needs to take a serious look at itself, from whatever they've done with the uniforms to the selection process to why this event has lost so much juice right now, Joe. Once again, to me, this is just a microcosm of it all.
I will say, Connor, on the positive side, the uniforms are coming back the way they used to be this year. So this is going to be the first year they're going to wear.
It took long enough.
Took long enough, but they're going to wear their team uniforms, which I think, I like it more because that's how it was when I was a kid. It ultimately, I guess, doesn't matter that much, but I like it a lot more that way.
Well, the uniforms they tried were horrendous year after year. That's if you're going to do it, you need to make them really special, and they didn't have that feel. So go back to the way it was.
If you look at the All-Star jerseys this year, again, very ugly.
They're horrendous.
But look, with Juan Soto, he obviously should be a part of the All-Star game. That's anyone who doesn't agree. I just don't know what you're watching as far as baseball goes exactly. But look, if he didn't win the fan vote to be a starter, okay, whatever. The fans vote. It is what it is. The next stage is players selecting. Why are the players not putting Juan Soto on the All-Star team? And a stat for you, it's from Between the Numbs on Twitter. I saw it, so I quote tweeted it earlier today. Only 7 players in MLB history have recorded at least 20 home runs, 70 walks, 15 doubles, and 10 stolen bases prior to the All-Star break in a season. Juan Soto is the only one of them to not make the All-Star team. Now, look, someone's going to drop out of this All-Star game, and Juan Soto will probably get added. And maybe he says, I don't feel like doing it. If you're not going to pick me, then I'm not going to be a replacement for you. The only thing that bothers me, I don't care about the All-Star game itself. It is an exhibition and all that. We talked about this with Francisco Lindor getting snubbed the last couple of years, and very happy that he's finally starting and a part of the All-Star team, as a Met. But I'm thinking down the road, because Juan Soto's on that trajectory for the Hall of Fame, and he may get there regardless. But when you look at legacy of players, whether we care about the All-Star game or not, every single time the Hall of Fame ballot comes around every year, they'll show the players, and the first line, 10-time All-Star, 11-time All-Star. So I think it matters from that perspective. But at the end of the day, as long as Juan Soto is taking names and kicking butt for the Mets, it's not the end of the world. But I would like to see him be where he belongs, which is at the All-Star game.
I think that's the only reason I care, is that so many conversations from credible people start with exactly what you just said, Joe. And this is going to be the problem when Francisco Lindor is, I'm assuming, in the Hall of Fame. There's just so many years for Francisco Lindor where he wasn't an All-Star, where you look back at it. I understand the slow starts, but there was also times where it was just egregious. And this isn't just a Juan Soto conversation. Seiya Suzuki on the Cubs, at 25 home runs. He was completely robbed as well. It's just, this is kind of how it goes right now. And
Trey Turner was robbed.
Trey Turner robbed. This is a multi-layered problem that goes back to, I think, the process, which includes that every team needs a rep, but also it's a little bit of a stumbling process along the way to actually select these guys. But congrats to Lindor, Edwin Diaz, and of course, Pete Alonso as well. No home run derby for Pete, Joe, which I really liked what he had to say about this. In short order, Pete was basically saying he feels like he's in a good groove right now hitting. He doesn't really kind of want to mess with that. He's never gotten to enjoy all 3 days of this entire process, because he's always been wrapped up in the Derby as well. So it gives him a little bit of a breather as well. But, a lot of times when somebody says this, people would look at it and think it's an excuse. But for Pete, who's hitting 287 right now, Joe, I mean, we all know Pete's best batting average year was as a rookie, where he hit 260. This is a legitimate case right now. Pete has been not just a slugger this year, but a better all-around hitter. So we all love watching Pete in the Derby, but I think if there was ever a year to kind of take a step back, it's all about the Mets going forward right now, and that's basically what he had to say.
Pete is just having the best year of his career. That's what it comes down
the
to.
Right
just
time
across the board. I mean, it's the perfect time to be doing it. It would have been awesome if he did it last year all year, but we don't need to go backwards. He's having the best year of his career, and I don't really buy into like the home run derby ruin swings and yada yada. But hey, if Pete Alonso's a guy that wants to enjoy the All-Star break for what it is, and doing the home run derby, he didn't just do the home run derby. He did the home run derby. You know, you saw him lifting weights and doing all this stuff. Like no one was more
serious
into the whole. Yeah, no one was more into the derby than Pete. So if he can take a step back, we're good here.
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously has different people advising him here too, and we all know how this is going to kind of conclude at the end of the year with a huge payday for Pete, and you know, it just kind of shows. I just think it's not a maturing phase. It's great that he got to do it and he got to enjoy it so much, but just at different points of your career, the objective changes, and I think the objective right now is every bit about the Mets winning a World Series and Pete getting a big payday when he assumingly opts out of this one. So. All right, so we're focused so much on the All-Star break, but there's still plenty of games left to play here. We got a full slate here, a full week here, Joe. You know, a big road trip for the Mets. They're going to start off with the Orioles, who have been one of the biggest disappointments in baseball right now, Joe, but they're starting to play a little better, including a sweep of the Braves, who it seems like the only team the Braves ever beat is the Mets because they actually lose to literally everybody else all the time.
It's crazy, but yeah, the Braves are going to be – I could only hope that they get forced into like not tear it up selling, but I would love to just be talking on this show in 3 weeks that the Braves traded away pieces. It would just make me happy.
I see Ozuna. I know he hasn't been healthy, but I think Ozuna will not be on that team after the deadline.
Yeah, and that would be great because we need the Braves out of this. That's what we need as Mets fans. I think
6
everyone
games left against them in the second half. Those are going to matter.
Yeah, so we need the Braves gone. But when you focus on the teams Baltimore and Kansas City, Baltimore's a team that I'm still scared of. I mean, they're playing a little better of late, but all it takes is, you know, a Gunnar Henderson and Jackson Holliday, these young players to step up in a 3-game series. There is still a lot of talent in Baltimore. It just doesn't seem to be clicking so much this year. Hopefully the Mets are able to take advantage. But when you look at just Baltimore, Kansas City, these are two sellers at the deadline. So the Mets really need to come out of this week. I would say, you know, we'll do the scoreboard, but no worse than 500, I think is probably fair to say. Like they better be at least 500. And the biggest thing for the road ahead here, Connor, is Jesse Winker. He's slated to be back on Tuesday. Kodai Senga, if everything goes well from a health perspective, he could make a start either Friday or Saturday in Kansas City. And Sean Manaea starts for AAA Syracuse on Tuesday. And if that start goes well and he comes out of it, he can be back for Sunday, the last game before the break. So the Mets not only are coming off a good week as far as winning games and seemingly getting the vibe back, but now those reinforcements are not like, hey, Connor, just keep holding on. They're coming back. They're going to get there. They could potentially all 3 of those players be back with the Mets this week.
Yeah, I think all 3 of those guys walking in the clubhouse, it just feels like, okay, guys, it's go time here. You know, there's no excuses on the table. We're playing better now. And, you know, obviously we want the Mets to win for very, very obvious reasons. But there is a secondary aspect here. It's funny, Joe, that you kind of alluded to. I mean, you don't want the Orioles and Royals thinking that they have a shot. You want as many sellers as you can get. And these are 2 American League teams that if you're going to be doing business, it is more likely than not, these are teams that you'll give a ring to, whether it is for center field help, bullpen help, any kind of pitching help, whatever it may be. So there is a little something here where the Orioles have kind of gotten it going. This is their last. They need to play lights out baseball in July. for them to really keep their foot on the gas. That's the kind of hole they dug themselves into. Although the way the Yankees have fallen, that division has opened up quite a bit, not just for Toronto, but for the other teams in it as well. And then the Royals, who, have kind of been all over the place this year. We've discussed how they called up Jack Caglianone, who hasn't hit the way they had hoped when they called him up, but they really did speed him through the minors, especially AAA. So he might just be, it's going to take a little while to blossom, but absolutely a big 6 games on deck here.
And Connor, quickly, when it comes to the Jack Caglianone of it all, and they rushed him, didn't rush him, they sped him through the system.
He was killing it through the minors.
He was crushing AAA, so I understand why they called him up, but let this just be a warning sign. Every time a minor leaguer performs at the AAA level, the answer isn't just call them up now, they're ready, because you don't know how ready they are. They're going to get opportunities, and Jack Caglianone is such a good hitter. He's going to be very good. I have zero doubt about that. But we have to learn as we move forward here to temper expectations on young talent, at least right out of the gate. It takes time to adjust. Major League Baseball is incredibly difficult. So that's just a lesson. Every time I post, Drew Gilbert hits a home run, I get responses, call him up. Every time Noel McLean spins another gem, call him up. Every time Brandon Sproat is now pitching well, call him up. So just use that Jack Caglianone as just a little bit of a warning that, hey, let's temper expectations for young players, at least the day they're called up.
All right, next week is not just the All-Star break, but also brings us the 2025 MLB Draft. And to help us look ahead to that is a good friend of the show who visits us every single July, senior writer for MLB Pipeline at MLB.com, Jim Callis, who you can also listen to on the MLB Pipeline podcast. Check out all his work covering prospects and the Major League Baseball Draft at MLB.com. Jim, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
We're good. We're excited. A little different year for the Mets, a little bit of a longer wait to pick. But before we get to them, we ask you this every single year, Jim. It's just such a good way to kind of set the table here. Big picture, what are the strengths and weaknesses of this draft class?
The strengths of the draft are definitely high school shortstops. There could be, I've lost count. There could be, I think, 6 who go in the first 14 or 15 picks. Last year, I think there were 2 high school players total, hitters, pitchers, who went in the first 15 picks. And there's a bunch more guys who, if they don't go, aren't necessarily going to fit in the top of the draft, but are going to fit in the sandwich round. So high school shortstops, far and away is the biggest strength. The college pitching class, we don't have a Paul Skeens or Chase Dollander or, from last year, Chase Burns or Hagen Smith, but we do have pretty good depth. There have been some guys who've emerged. So I think the second best part of the draft would be the college pitching group. The weakness is college hitting group is not good, especially compared to the last 2 years where we were spoiled. Like all the guys, there are good players, obviously, but they all have obvious hickeys. And, you look at a guy like Ivar Arquette from Oregon State, who's the consensus top college position player. Honestly, and I'm not saying this based on how guys have done since they were drafted. If he was in last year's draft, I don't know that he goes ahead of Cam Smith, who went 14th overall. And he's going to be the first college bat drafted last year. Last year, Cam Smith was maybe the 8th or 9th. High school pitching, I think high school pitching is about what it normally is. You have a guy in Seth Hernandez who's one of the better high school pitchers in recent years, but you also have the trepidation of the industry of taking those guys high. So high school pitching's probably, right around where it usually is overall, I think.
So for a team like the Mets, they don't pick until number 38 overall. Obviously, that's due to their pick falling 10 spots for spending a lot of money, which could be a different conversation if we ever wanted to have it. And also, given the fact that they don't pick again until number 102 overall because they lost draft selection for signing Juan Soto, that by nature just gives them, I believe they have the second smallest bonus pool in Major League Baseball for the draft. How does that affect how you strategize your way through the draft as the Mets?
Yeah, they have a 5.5. That's what I was just trying to look at. They have a $5.5 million pool, which I think is $100,000 more than the Yankees have. Yeah, so I think fans, when they look at this dream, like, okay, 38, like they'll go big. Well, if you try to take a guy who's been pushed down or who's an over slot guy, it makes it hard even to do that. Like if you take a $4 million player, then you pretty much have $1.5 million for the rest of the top 10 rounds. It doesn't give you a whole lot. The other thing is, you're beholden to who gets there. You have no control. There's 37 guys that are going to come off the board before you get to pick. So even if there is a high school guy, it's usually a high school guy at that point, like who's an overslot guy that you want. The problem is, and even let's say you're willing to pull the trigger, there's probably another team that has more money that, let's say the Mets, there's some guy they want to give $4 million to. They're willing to do it. You may have a team says, like, just tell the Mets you aren't signing for 4 and come down to pick 45 or whatever, and we'll give you 4.5. So my guess is they'll have to play it pretty straight up. My guess is they'll take a guy who belongs around 38 on talent rather than a guy who fell. And I don't think you get cute and try to save money on that pick to push a guy down to the 3rd round. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. I think you take a guy for around $2.5 million, and then the 3rd round pick. Again, you're skipping a whole round, so it's like what, going to be like 70 picks away or whatever it is. You can't count, even if you want a guy to get there, you have some strategy, you can't count on them getting there. So I think the Mets are kind of in a position where you just have to take each pick as it comes and pretty much, take the best guy who's a slot guy there with each choice.
So the team picking first overall in this draft moved on from their GM in a bit of a surprise, or felt like a surprise, at least to us, a week out from the draft. And another aspect of this, Jim, is that they have another pick inside the top 50 besides the first overall pick. Can this create a bit of chaos for that organization as they head into the draft?
I don't know if it creates chaos so much as it's not as stable. I mean, I know I'm looking at it, I guess, glass half full, glass half empty, not as stable. But I mean, look, they're pretty far along in the process with pick number 1. Like, I think they could be looking as many as 7 or 8 guys. This decision probably comes down to Kate Anderson or Ethan Holliday in the end. None of that changes. The draft's 6 days away as we record this. So it's not like they're like, oh, we got to start over. Let's just throw everything out. Everybody come back. We're going to start from scratch. It doesn't work that way. And I had some people suggest, look, it's no secret that through the draft and just clients, free agents, Mike Rizzo has signed an awful lot of Scott Boras clients over the years. And I've had people ask me, oh, is that going to change that? Well, Ethan Holliday and Kate Anderson, who are the top 2 favorites, I think, pretty much from the rest of the pack to go number 1 overall, are both Scott Boras clients. So it's not like the new regime is going to be like, we're not as tight with Scott. We just aren't going to take those guys. I don't think in the end it's really going to affect much. I would think you have to make the final decisions, but I think the Nationals are already figuring out, and those discussions will go on, exactly how much do we like the player? How much is he going to cost? And if we save X amount versus Y amount, what does that mean with our next pick? But they've already started all that stuff. So it is unusual to see this happen. The last time I can remember a GM getting fired when they had the team at the number 1 pick in season was when the Royals, Allard Baird, got fired. I think that was 2006. And I think that was a little bit more in advance of the draft. I might be wrong on that. But I don't think it's going to shake it up too much. It goes back to process. If you firing your GM blows up your whole process, then you don't have a good process. And that's not the case. Brad Ciolek, Danny Haas, they know what they're doing in Washington. And yeah, is it different? Was anybody expecting this? No, but I don't think it'll really change much about who they pick or what strategy they invoke.
So, Jim, as Connor said at the top, we have you on every single year. And last year when we had you on, you more or less predicted that Carson Benge would be the Mets' first-round pick. And,
yeah.
of course, we have record of this, so let's roll the tape.
At 19 for the Mets, I've heard pretty much all college bats. The 2 I hear the most are Carson Benge from Oklahoma State and Vance Honeycutt from North Carolina. They're both outfielders, and they're both really interesting. I had Benge in my last mock draft going to the Mets at 19 about 10 days ago. I actually think he's probably going to go off the board before that. But, he's interesting because teams, when they're looking at data, they look at swing decisions, contact rate, and how hard you hit the ball. And he scores well in all 3. He's got one of the best triple metrics there, if you will. He's a 2-way guy at Oklahoma State. And usually, he's going to focus on hitting at the next level. And usually when guys do that, they get better. So I think there's more room for him to get better than your typical college player. Also, I think he's a little bit underrated as an athlete. He's an average-ish runner, maybe a slight tick above with good instincts. So I don't know that he could play center field, but you could try him there. And I just think when it comes time to making picks and teams get more, like, you feel really good this guy's going to hit. So I don't know that he's going to get to them. But I think if he does, that would be his floor.
So we're going to say, you said he may not make it, but he did. And you said that was his floor. So you absolutely nailed it, Jim. So now we're a year removed, essentially, probably pretty close to the day. What has been your takeaway of Carson Benge in his first professional season?
Kind of what I thought he'd be. I mean, I thought he was one of the more advanced hitters. I thought he'd be a guy who could make a transition to pro ball pretty easily. I think he's done that. It's a good thing. I mean, it's great if the guy's even better than you think. That's nice too. But it's nice to not be disappointed in your first round pick. I mean, I was just looking up his numbers. He's hitting close to 300. He's slugging, in the upper fours. He's walking on as much as he struck out. He's got 17 steals. I mean, I think the big question is, turning some of those doubles into home runs, which I think will happen in time. But yeah, I think he's been kind of the guy they thought he was going to be.
So coming off that accurate prediction, Jim, and this one, it's going to be a little tougher. We're increasing the difficulty this year. Could you give us a name or two you think have a shot in the 38 range? So next year we could run the audio again of you being right.
Okay, well, I'm gonna give you 4 names.
Deal.
Which I think is fair because we're doing pick 38. And like I was saying before, when you're looking at the pick, you can't really take a high school guy. If a high school guy's there, I mean, you can take a high school guy who fits there on talent. So maybe you could, but you can't really push a high school down. So I think the odds are they're going to take a college player. I'm going to throw out 6 names and we can figure out who we want to talk about because we want to talk about 6. I think if you're looking at college bats, the types of guys who are going to be available, there's Mason Neville from Oregon who led NCAA Division I, tied for the lead in home runs. There's Alex Lodies, who won the Dick Hauser Award. He's a Florida State shortstop. It's weird. He had a great year, but he chases a little bit. You have Brandon Compton from Arizona State, who put on a show at the Combine, huge exit velocity, huge power. Didn't have a great year, was banged up a little bit. And then you have Dean Curley from Tennessee, who I would have thought coming into the year would have gone in the top 20 picks. And he's a sophomore eligible. He had some defensive issues, so he wound up bouncing around from short to third to second, even DH some at Tennessee. But he might be a good buy low candidate. So those guys are probably the college bats. Type of guys will be around there. And then from a pitching standpoint, a couple guys who could get there. Although there's Riley Quick from Alabama, who's really interesting, and he has good pitch metrics, but he doesn't dominate as much as you'd like him to. I think somebody's going to take him before there, but I think he'd be interesting for the Mets if he got there. And then the pitcher who might be the best combination of they'd have interest in him and he could get there is a guy, J.B. Middleton from Southern Miss, who was a reliever his first 2 years. He's 6 feet tall, but he can really pitch. And it's solid stuff, 3 solid pitches, threw a bunch of strikes, one of the best pitching seasons in NCAA this year. So that's kind of the pool of players I think they'd be looking at.
Shifting back quick to the number 1 pick, you mentioned that maybe the 2 leaders in the clubhouse right now would be Ethan Holliday and Cade Anderson from LSU. When it comes to Ethan Holliday, if the people listening don't know, Ethan is the other son of Matt Holliday and the brother of Jackson, who went number 1 overall a couple of years ago. How would you compare and contrast Ethan and Jackson as prospects?
It's funny. If you see Ethan Holliday, he looks like I imagine Matt Holliday looked at the same time. He's 6'4". He's big. Jackson's more like 6 feet tall. And then they're different types of players. Jackson was one of the best high school hitters in recent memory. And Ethan is more of a power guy. Ethan's probably the best power ceiling in this whole draft. I mean, he could be a future 40 home run guy. Jackson's quicker. He's more of a middle infielder. I think Ethan's not a bad athlete for size, but he's kind of built, like I said, like Matt. He's 6'4", 210. I think like his dad broke into pro ball as a third baseman. I think that's where Ethan Holliday probably winds up. I think he's more athletic than his dad, who wound up being a left fielder. But yeah, he's if you're comparing him to Holliday, you could compare him to Matt in terms of physicality and type of player he is than you would to Jackson.
Nearly every year, Jim, there are names that end up going in the top 10 unexpectedly. And I know there's a lot of different ways to kind of caveat that, whether it could be bonus pool reasons or other reasons. Who's a name that's maybe outside of your top 15 rankings right now that you could see having to jump up into a top 10 selection?
Yeah, see, and that one's tough because I don't know that they're like like you said, it happens, and obviously if we expected it, we'd be more on
Right.
top of it. I don't know that there's really a guy like that. I think there's kind of a consensus, top 10 players. Number 11 on our list is a guy named Ike Irish, who might be the best college hitter in this year's draft, just from an offensive perspective. And there's talk that he might cut a deal and goes high as 2, 3, or 5. So we're hearing that. Outside our top 15, I would be shocked this year. I mean, I could cheat and say Brendan Summerhill, who we have ranked 16th, and I have projected to go 11. But I mean, that's just barely qualifying for what you said. He's a potential 2020 center fielder from the University of Arizona. But there's no like super helium guy. Ike Irish is that helium's kind of pushed him up into that range. I'm just scrolling down the list. Even like for instance, I know. Like I get a lot of fans ask, what about Gage Wood at Arkansas, who threw the 19 strikeout no-hitter and was a hit batter away from a perfect game in Omaha? What about him? Because we've got Gage Wood ranked. I don't remember our rankings off the top of my head. We have Gage Wood ranked 23rd on our list, but I can't see Gage Wood going. Like Gage Wood's good, but I can't see him going like in the top. He might go like in the mid-teens. The top 10 would be tough. I mean, he missed 2 months this year with a shoulder issue. He has shoulder issues going back to high school. I mean, it's a great fastball. It's a pretty good breaking ball too. He's really interesting, but I just think with the shoulder history, I'd be really shocked if somebody was like, okay, we're taking that guy in the top 10. So Jim, if it happens, don't roll that tape. Don't roll that tape if it happens. But I don't know who the guy would be this year.
We're only here to make you look good, Jim. That's all we're here for. But last one for you. We all here love the MLB draft. You've been doing it for a very long time. I've been doing it for what is becoming a very long time. If I gave you complete autonomy to adjust, let's say 2 or 3 things about the draft in the next CBA, what would be the things that you would adjust about the MLB draft? And I'm sure it starts with trading picks, but I'm not going to give an answer for you.
It does not start with trading picks, but that would be one. I'm going to give you 3 things. I'm going to give you 3 things. One, we're moving the draft back to June. We're moving the draft back to June. That's number 1, like well above everything else. 2, I would change the draft lottery rules a little bit. Like I'm fine with the draft lottery. I don't know the teams tank as much as people think they tank. And you look at the 2 teams that have been punished the most by draft lottery are going to get punished the most. White Sox set a record for losses last year, but because they're a revenue sharing payor, and they had won the lottery the year before, even though they moved backwards in the draft to count as winning the lottery because they were in the top 6, they couldn't pick higher than 10th. They weren't trying to tank. They were just bad. The Rockies aren't trying to tank this year. They're just bad, but they're picking the top 6 for second year in a row. So Rockies could lose 130 games or whatever, 125 games, and they can't pick in the top 10. So I don't like that. I would either add another year instead of it being 1 year or 2, depending on your revenue sharing status. I'd make it 2 or 3. And if we're saying, okay, you can't win the lottery, well, why can't you pick 7th instead of 10th? Because it sets the rebuilding of those teams so far back, not just going from a potential number 1 overall pick to 10th. You're losing millions of dollars of pool money you don't get back. So that almost would be number 1 in terms of what would be most just. But I'm thinking of me. So I want the draft in June. Although the teams will like it in June, the agents will like it in June. Everybody wants it in June. So I'm doing that for everybody too. But that would be the most equitable thing. And then 3, I would have the trading and draft picks. And I don't even think anybody's against trading and draft picks. I just think, unfortunately, when it comes time to negotiate that in the CBA, it seems like there's always something, they're scrambling to get the deal done in time so we don't lose games. And like that gets put on the back burner. And then there's not enough time to revisit. I don't think anybody's against trading draft picks, but I would, and maybe you limit it to the first round. Maybe you limit it to the top 2 rounds. Maybe you say no more than 2 years in the future. But it would create so much. I think trading draft picks would create more interest in the draft. I love the draft as much as anybody. The bottom line is, A, people don't know who a lot of these players are because they aren't as famous as, you got A, guys coming out of high school. B, the college baseball players aren't as famous as football and basketball players. And then also guys, for the most part, are not going to be in the big leagues immediately. So if I'm a fan of, say, the Mets, especially this year when they're picking 38th, whoever they pick, probably isn't going to be on the team till 2027 at the earliest. whoever it is isn't going to help. Most of the first round picks aren't going to help people's fantasy teams until 2027 at the earliest, and some later than that. So I just think imagine if you had the Mets traded pick 38 for somebody to help the big league club, or the Cubs are having a great season, could use some more pitching, traded the number 17 pick for a pitcher. I almost would spice it up and say, I don't know how you'd enforce this, but I'd say, well, we're not going to announce the deals till the pick comes. So it wouldn't just be Jeff Passan or Mark Feinstein's reporting like, hey, the Cubs are trading pick 17. Just the drama, like you have to watch a draft. Wait a minute, we have an announcement. The Cubs have traded pick 17 to the Marlins for Sandy Alcantara or whatever. So I would have that drama of we don't announce the pick trades until the actual pick happens.
I think that's a surefire way to get a ton of eyes, even more eyes on the draft.
For sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim. Yeah, and
I was just going to say, like, if you're a fan of a contending team, like I'm looking you're like the Cardinals are having a good. They picked 5th. Like you're like, I got to watch. Like, what if they trade that pick and get whoever's on the block? Right. Like I think it would be really, really interesting if we did. Can I ask you guys a question? I was just curious.
Please. Yeah.
Who do you guys want at 38? Do you have a realistic hope of who you guys want at 38?
I'm kind of hoping for one of the high school kids to fall, even though you're telling me they're going to take a college kid. Like,
I don't think they can pay him. Which high school kid do you want?
Like, a Slater DeBrun, who's probably going to go in the late 20s anyway.
Yeah.
Is it like, could someone like Slater DeBrun fall? A guy, I think a high school kid that would be kind of in the range, perhaps, would be someone like a Tate Southacene. I think he's a pretty interesting athlete, and he might fit that mold of what you're saying, where it's a guy that maybe should go in the range of 38 overall, but possesses maybe a little more upside than a floor college player, maybe, if that makes sense. But look, Mason Neville, he's an exciting player. I think he could play up the middle. Like you said, he led the nation home run, so there's some power there. So the Mets have some good, I think, options at 38. What would be fun if there was trading, there would be a question in this interview. Hit my computer. But there would be a question in this interview. Hey, Jim, who's the guy that the Mets can trade up for at number 13? Because you mentioned trading like a pick for a player, but trading up from 38 to 13 to get your hands on blank. So I think that would add to it as well.
That would be interesting too. Or in this year's draft where maybe you don't like the guys who are on the board at number 5, like you have a couple guys you like, but you don't love 5 players. Maybe you trade down to somebody who wants to come up and do that. How about?
To me, that's the most interesting aspect of it. This is the first year in a long time I have my eyes just not set on a guy because they're just so far back, and it's just so hard. Like you said, Jim, like you gave us 6 guys there where when it gets to pick 30, I'll start to narrow down a list. Like when Colin Houck fell to the team, I was excited. When he started to fall, it wasn't anything drastic, but it was like, I hope he makes it to them here. But to the point of another element of trading is that it can allow teams that feel good about the volume of their system to maybe go for I know one player class is kind of a ridiculous thing to say in the MLB draft, but you could package picks and go for a big swing where a team that looks at it and goes, God, we have such a shallow system right now, but we have the 3rd pick in the draft. We don't love anyone at 3. Can we get more quantity of picks and kind of retool the volume of our system? I think that's a huge aspect besides just actually having pro players being moved for picks that would change how teams operate and make it really exciting.
No, you're right. And I was just thinking too, it might not just be big league players you trade for. Also, what if I have a deep farm system and I know I'm going to have a 40-man roster crunch and I'm not going to be able to keep anybody? Right. It might behoove me to trade, hey, look, this guy's in his protection year, or this guy's on the 40 and we're going to need the spot. Like, hey, there's a team that, doesn't have a lot of talent and doesn't have a good farm system. Maybe I trade one of those guys for a 2nd-round pick. And then we see that all the time in November where teams trade guys who have to be protected for guys who are 2 or 3 years away from being protected just to kind of push the decision down the road. But yeah, that would be really good. It would make my job a lot harder because I think doing the whole mock draft industrial complex would be much more difficult because it would be like the NFL where the NFL reporters always talk about how the teams just blatantly lie to them because you could trade. Like a team can't say, hey, we like this guy because then somebody might leapfrog him. Oh, we didn't realize the guy was going that high. We're going to jump up and get him. Like right now, that's one of the nice things. Not that all the teams say, hey, this is who we're taking and just tell you. That's not the case. But teams can be kind of, they'll sit there and discuss who they like because they don't have to worry if, hey, I'm projecting Mason Neville to go to the Mets at 38, and let's say the Dodgers are picking 40th, and they really like Mason Neville, okay, they're going to trade with the Twins and move up to 36 to take him.
And I think that's the theater that the NFL draft
Yeah.
has, that the MLB would be able to, in some way or the other, follow a little bit of just the mystery and the lying season and everything like that. So we'll see where it goes. Good ideas across the board, Jim. And I don't know if you're going to get your wish about June, to be honest with you, but I think much to your chagrin, but I do think you'll get your wish about trading picks. Remember, of course, you could check out Aldrim's draft and prospect coverage at MLB.com. Please follow MLB Pipeline and listen to the MLB Pipeline podcast. Jim, we appreciate you carving out some time for us every single year this time of year. We love talking to you. Thanks so much, and good luck with the big event.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. You guys always ask good questions. It's always fun. It's like, I know it's like the final week leading up to the draft when I'm doing the Mets pod. So
right.
I'm happy to.
Thanks, Jim. All right, as always, a big thanks to Jim Callis, who we're very fortunate. He has joined Joe and I a lot of years in a row right now to preview the MLB draft. I will say, Joe, it's a little nice that we're not walking on pins and needles, freaking out about the draft, where, hey, this pick is going to matter a lot for the Mets in 3 to 4 years. It'll matter, but this team is just so good right now that we got to get to take a macro view of the draft, including our talk about some young players. We are going back on the farm as we have been for the last couple of weeks now. Francisco Alvarez still hitting home runs. The Mets catchers in the big leagues are not really hitting at all. When, Joe, do we get the up from the farm call here for Alvarez, who, I mean, it seems like the confidence is back in AAA?
It's definitely building. Like, he's still not having like the best at bats down there. The highlights are really good, and there's been a couple things behind the plate. But I'll tell you this, talking to people within the system, they're very happy with the way that Alvarez handled Brandon Sproat in his couple starts and the way he handled Nolan McLean. So I think David Stern said when they sent Alvarez down, there's not a statistical plateau that he needs to hit to come back. It's not like he needs to hit 300 for blank amount of days and then he could come back. I think this was a mental reset, a physical reset, and you are seeing, we talked about on last week's show, kind of the vintage Alvarez stance and hand placement. So that's going to be something I'm going to keep an eye on when he does eventually come back. Where are his hands at? What's his stance look like? I think that'll be relevant. For me, I think at this point, after the All-Star break sounds perfect. Like the first game out of the break, bring Alvarez back, bring Brooks Raley back on the same day. And I think that seems like the right time. The Mets can make it, I think, 6 more games with the Luis Torrens and Hayden Sanger of it all. And Alvarez at that point will have a sizable mental and physical reset. And then he could come back and hopefully, as you said earlier in the show, maybe not be rookie year 25 home run Francisco Alvarez, but be an everyday catcher that you could hit 7th in your lineup or something like that and get some productivity out of him.
Yeah, he factors into an equation you were going to hear, a lot on this show, quite frankly, over the next month is upgrades. And they don't have to be going from, hey, we got no right fielder, now we have Juan Soto. But can they be, hey, Hayden Sanger, really typically your third catcher, Luis Torrens, a fine backup catcher. Can Francisco Alvarez be an adequate starting catcher? Because right now, that would be an upgrade for the Mets. And the Mets are going to be looking to kind of fill those voids in a lot of different areas. So that's back on the farm. But of course, we got to go down on the farm. And we got a down on the farm mailbag here from Michael B. He's at MBNYC on YouTube. Thank you, Michael, for the question. Hey, guys, how come we're not hearing more about Nick Morabito? Been really impressed this year. And obviously, he was the Mets minor league player of the year last year. Athletic, competitive, fast as grass. Is Jet Williams really a more impressive prospect? Thanks, as always. Joe, before I toss to you for the Nick Morabito breakdown, I just want to give a shout out to this question because it is funny, and this is probably more of a, these are happier times in the Mets system, just the sheer volume they have. But Morabito was a 2nd-round pick for the Mets just, 2 years ago here, 3 years ago here, and he's been good in the system so far, Joe. And we don't give him a lot of airtime, and that'll obviously change now that he's got 74 games under his belt in Double A, and he'll try to make his way to Syracuse eventually. But what have you seen from him this year in his age 22 season?
Going back to the draft, he was from the DC area, high school kid, and he was someone that was like a pop-up prospect in that spring. He wasn't at the area code games. He wasn't at Under Armour All-American, or I don't even think it's Under Armour anymore, but whatever, the All-American game. He was a little under the radar, and the Mets drafted him and still gave him $1 million to sign. So they were big fans of Morabito. And when you break down kind of the player he is, I give him some credit. He is starting to impact the baseball a little more this year. If you look back to what he did in Brooklyn, I mean, it was a lot of ground balls, and the ground ball rate is still higher than you'd like it to be, but it was really kind of slap hitting. And this year he's gotten to a little bit more power. He has 23 doubles. He has 4 home runs. And, mentioned it in the question, he's got the speed, 31 stolen bases. He could really play center field. I think the overall picture here is, I think long-term, it's going to be a contact-based, not really much thump. I don't know how the gap-to-gap is going to work at even the AAA level, let alone the major league level. I think Nick Morabito is a future Major League Baseball player. I think the thing is, unlike a guy like Jet Williams, who I think has a high ceiling, I think Morabito is more of a high floor rather than a high ceiling type of player, where if you told me Morabito was going to be a 4th outfielder, I totally buy into that. And maybe it's a tweener 4th outfielder / like low end starter. I think that would be the best projection. But again, just another talented young player that's performing in the Mets system this year.
Is there legit pro center field upside here, though, Joe? I think that's what people would care about the most, is that, hey, we don't just got to throw him in a corner. Like, that we need even if that's a 4th or 5th outfielder, playing center field is how you stick on an MLB roster.
True center fielder. Absolutely. Like, it's not a projection to have Nick Morabito as a center fielder.
Yeah, that'll be big. So we'll keep an eye on Morabito as he keeps working his way through the system and the improvements he makes. But a really good call out from Michael B. Some notes from Brooklyn. This Thursday, the first 1,000 fans in attendance will receive an Edwin Diaz bobblehead presented by Verizon. Friday, there'll be fireworks and an Amazins jersey giveaway for the first 1,000 fans. Saturday night, the first 2,500 fans receive a Superman bobblehead. And Sunday afternoon, the first 1,000 fans receive a retired number 5 David Wright jersey. For tickets, visit brooklyncyclones.com/tickets. You're listening to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch every episode on SMY's YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, as we do every week, we got to review our scoreboard predictions from last week and make some new ones. So the first one, over-under push was at 1 for Pete Alonso home runs. Joey had the combo. Feels like he hits them in bunches, and that's why you went over. I pushed, and he did go over. He hit 2, of course, in the same game. You get the point. Over-under pushes at 1 for Mark Vientos home runs. Joe, you pushed. I went under. Unfortunately, Vientos did not hit a home run. I got the point. Over-under push was at 1 for Francisco Alvarez home runs across 6 games in AAA. We both pushed. He actually went over. Alvarez hit 2 home runs. No points for each of us. Over-under pushes at 1 for Aaron Judge home runs against the Mets. Joe, you pushed. I pushed. He hit 2. He should have only hit 1. I don't know why the Mets pitched to him on Sunday, but nonetheless, we don't get a point. Yes or no, will the Mets win the Subway Series this weekend? Joe, I didn't like the pitching matchups. You felt confident, and for that, you are rewarded, my friend, with a point. Over-under push was at 3 for Mets wins. We both pushed. We felt good about a 500 week. The Mets exceeded our expectations and won 4 games. No points awarded. A 2-point week for you, a 1-point week for me, which means you now lead the season series 41-40 in our tightly contested scoreboard matchup. So we got 6 games on deck before the All-Star break. All on the road. 3 against the Orioles, 3 against the Royals. Over-under push is at 1 for Brandon Nimmo home runs. Joe, what do you got? Nimmo has 3 already in the month of July.
I will push. I think Brandon Nimmo's on a good streak right now, and maybe he does go over this, but I'll push. I think he's in a good spot where I think he will get a home run. I just won't go over, but just glad to be picking first for the first time in a while and just being back in the lead. I feel like I'm where I belong right now.
Yeah, it took you long enough for all that confidence. I'm going to go with the push as well here for Nimmo. He's just not only swinging a hot bat. We've seen the power this year, and it feels like he's found his stride more than ever right now. I mean, the numbers don't lie. He's gotten better each month of the season. 6 games. I like Nimmo to hit a home run. Over under push is at 1 for Mark Vientos home runs. This is one of the trickier ones on the board here, Joe. Nothing we've seen from Vientos indicates that you should be taking this number, but I'm actually going to push here because Starling Marte hurt his knee on Sunday. So I'm curious how much the Mets ultimately push him before the break. And for Vientos, that should, in theory, at least at DH, mean some more playing time. Now, Jesse Winker will be back. I don't think the Mets will run Winker into the ground before the break. You will see him obviously play against righties, but Vientos should, in theory, get enough at-bats. He is so beyond overdue for one. So I will take a very risky push here.
He is so beyond due, as you said, Connor, but man, these at-bats from Vientos, they're rough right now. It's
looks like he's guessing.
Yeah, he's guessing at everything. He's not on breaking balls. He's not on the fastball. So I will go under on Vientos home runs. You're going to take the risk. I'm going to take the safer play. And, hopefully he hits 2. That would be great. So that way neither of us get a point and Mark Vientos is back on track. That works for me.
All right, back to you, Joe, for this one. Over under pushes at 2 for hits by a Mets catcher. Yes, that number in 6 games is set at 2, as in 1, 2.
So I will say they have to play a catcher every day.
Yes, and they have to hit through the turn of the order.
They're required to hit. So I will push, and I think that it almost feels aggressive with the way Terrence and Sanger have been, but I will push and say that Mets catchers will combine for 2 hits this week.
Man, this is a brutal one. I mean, God, these catchers should get at least 3 at-bats. You're talking about 18 at-bats. I'm going to I want to get my lead back, so I'm taking more risk, which means I could set myself up for even more trouble here, Joe. But I'm going to take the over here. Can you get me 3 hits and say 20 at-bats? It's not a lot to ask. And we've seen Terrence have some moments. I mean, Sanger obviously... Yeah, I mean, it's the situation the Mets are in with having, kind of their third catcher having to play throughout this time of the year until Alvarez is back. So I'm going to take the very, very risky over. But man, this number is just so hilariously low. It feels like a trap. Over under is 4.5 for Jeff McNeil hits. McNeil's been quietly for a while, but very, very good this year. Gotten some flashes of power recently. I'm actually going to go under here, Joe. Just for the simple fact that, I don't think McNeil's going to play all 6 of these games, although you never know. You might get a surprise here or there. But I think that, McNeil has been so good lately. You need a little come back down to earth. He doesn't hit high in the order. There's a lot of times, especially against lefties, where you see McNeil bat 8th, which really limits how many at-bats he gets. So I'm actually going to take a surprise under here.
I'm also going to go under, as you said. I imagine he'll play 5 out of the 6, right? He's going to play most, if not all, of the games. I don't know if we're facing lefties. I haven't looked into the pitching matchups for the rest of the week, but I'll go under. And if Jeff has a 4-hit week, it's not like he had a bad week. I just don't know if we're going to be doing that 5+, and so I'll go under with you.
Yeah, always tricky to figure out, just how much guys are going to play because the Mets play a lot of different players. This goes back to the Vientos conversation and the fact they've really been juggling lineups. But a guy that they don't really mess with too much is Juan Soto, Joe, and his walks is set at 4.5 for the over-under here. What do you like for Soto, who is doing his thing and getting on base at just an insane rate right now?
I'm going to take the over. I mean, I look back week over week, and like a low week for Juan Soto is 4 walks. So I suspect he's going to walk 5+ times this week, and hopefully mix a couple homers in there too, because not only is he drawing the walks, he's hitting the way that everyone wants Juan Soto to hit. So I will go over on the walks, and I still think Juan Soto will continue his hot stretch leading into the break.
So I'm actually going to go on the under for the sheer fact that I think the All-Star snub will see a little bit of an angry swinging Soto, which is not very common, but I think we're going to see Soto try to make a little bit of a statement. Now, there's a chance by the time these series start that there is an injury or something that could put Soto on the roster, but I'm going to think we see a Juan Soto swinging the bat and making an even bigger statement. The over-under is at push is 4 for Mets wins on the week here, Joe. I am going to push. and say the Mets win 4 of these 6 games. I know the Orioles have been playing much better. The Royals have kind of had this roller coaster up and down season a lot. I think the Mets have kind of found their groove a little bit. It started with the Brewers series. The offense looked excellent against the Yankees. It seems like pitching help is on the way this week. On top of that, I think the Mets win 4 or 6. I'll go with the push.
I'm also going to go with the push. Vibes seem better, obviously, coming off the weekend. And just, you could tell, like, the energy that the Mets played with this weekend with the Yankees. You could tell that they're starting to feel themselves a little bit. And it's opponents that you should beat. They have reinforcements coming. Everything about this screams they're going to go 2 out of 3 for each series, win 4. Certainly, I think if they do any worse than 3-3, 500, we'll be having a different conversation probably on next week's show.
All right, let's get to the mailbag to close things out here. This is from No Upload, just comment on YouTube. If you could bring one former Met from any season onto this roster, who would it be and why? Hard mode. Nobody who had their number retired by the team. So I think since it is you and I, Joe, we have to play this on hard mode because it's not.
Of course.
Because I think these questions are always. And you also have to factor in where the Mets are from a positional standpoint where, hey, it's good to have Francisco Lindor out there at short. It's great to have Pete Alonso out there at first. Does anybody jump to your mind right away? Because, I mean, I think there's one for me that is almost a no-brainer if you're going for an everyday player rather than a pitcher.
I mean, for me, it's, can I just have 2006 Carlos Beltran?
That's the
roaming
one.
Center field. That's the one.
I think this answer is, now other people might have, different ideas. I thought this was like there's a chalk answer here. 2006 Beltran, which is a theme of this show. Just to remind people, and then take it away, Joe. 982 OPS. Yes, 982 OPS for Beltran. He hit 41 home runs. He stole 18 bases, which in this era, he's stealing 25 to 30 right now. He got on base 39% of the time, and he was an incredible center fielder. 2006 Carlos Beltran, as it's probably not underrated anymore because we say it on the show every single year, but I think it's the most underrated, underappreciated Mets season of all time.
100%. And Carlos Beltran, look, that's a 5-tool player. Like you hear that term thrown around. Carlos Beltran was a true 5-tool guy. Imagine hitting him second or third and pairing him with Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor and then the power of Pete Alonso. I think Beltran is the obvious answer. David Wright is getting his number retired.
It doesn't count. Yeah, can't use it.
Yeah, but he's not retired yet. He's not retired, so technically he applies. And then I guess the only other thing I could think of, like, would you want a prime Jacob deGrom at the top of the rotation because there's questions about an ace. But for me, center field is a spot that the Mets are looking probably to upgrade in the next 3 weeks. And they're not going to get somebody as good as Carlos Beltran to fill that role. So give me Carlos Beltran and watch this Mets team go to the World Series.
2 really good shouts from our producer, Jeff. He's looking at third base, and I think these are seasons that I overlook all the time. Obviously, 2000 Eduardo Alfonso, who had a 967 OPS that year, and the season before, Robin Ventura, 1999 Robin Ventura at third base. So third base is another spot that you could look at. I mean, I think those are, those are the 2 positions, if you didn't go pitching, that you'd constantly look at. I'm trying to think if there's anyone we really missed. DeGrom's a fun one, Joe, because we just always wondered what DeGrom would be in that situation. And we've talked about, this is still a team at the end of the day, because of his health, Senga's health woes, that do they have that guy in the front of the rotation right now? And without that guy, can you win a World Series? So ultimately we're going to find out. But I had a feeling you and I would be eye to eye on that 2006 Beltran, especially with how much we talk about center field. Our last question for the mailbags from friend of the show, Jordan Simpson. Of course, Jordan, who you could follow on Twitter with all his great Mets music, is JR Simpson Music on Twitter. Pretend you're David Stearns. If Minaya, Senga, Winker, and Alvarez return relatively to form, how much will it impact your aggressiveness at the deadline? Either way, I think you got to add impact to the bullpen. So I think a healthy Minaya and Senga functioning at a high level, probably if you're David Stearns, and people could agree or disagree with this. I'm just speaking to how I view it from Stearns. Joe, I don't think they'd be very aggressive for the front end of the rotation. And I'm talking really a starter you could call a guy that'd be a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Like, remember when they got Blackburn last year? We're like, hey, this protects you from an injury spot at your number 5 spot. That was the idea with Blackburn. And the reason being is, if you're getting a guy that you think is in even the middle of your rotation, you're paying an absurd price at the deadline because there are so few sellers and so much of a need for starting pitching, where I think the Mets would like what they have at the top of the rotation. People don't have to agree with that, but I think that's how the Mets viewed the team building process in season, not at the winter. And then you look at Winker. I mean, if Winker comes back and is who he is, I don't think the Mets are dying to get a DH at the deadline. I mean, if there was a cost-effective option, I don't think they'd be against it, but left-handed DH, I think they like Winker there. And then, of course, if Alvarez gets back to form, you're not going to make a move for a catcher. So I think at the end of the day, Joe, these are spots that if these guys are back to form, Stearns won't be aggressive here. It goes back to center field and bullpen, which we keep saying over and over again.
So I'm taking this question from the perspective of, if these guys come back and perform, it's not necessarily specifically like, do they also need to be aggressive for a starting pitcher? And to be honest with you, I don't think the starting pitching market is shaping up to be all that awesome. Like, who is going to be the best? Who's going to be? Is Sandy Alcantara going to be the best starter dealt? And he has a 7 ERA. You know, there's other guys that are rentals, like Zach Eflin, I think, could be available. Zach Gallen could be available.
Who's been
Merrill
awful,
Kelly,
by the way.
Yes. Which,
like, I love Zach Gallen, but
sounds like a Met if I've ever heard one, right?
The point is with those guys is, and this is the Alcantara conversation, right, can you buy low? But the Marlins have team control with Alcantara that there is no buy low here. They could sit there and be like, no, thank you. We're not going to take your 13th overall prospect because we'll just hope he bounces back and then trade him for twice as much of that. That's exactly the whole problem.
Yeah, but I would say, if you tell me Kodai Senga is going to come back and pitch, maybe not to the same ERA that he pitched before the injury, but pitch like an ace type of pitcher, and Sean Manaea comes back and he pitches like Sean Manaea of 2024 in the second half, and Jesse Winker is a suitable DH, I think it actually, in a way, almost makes me want to be more aggressive for center field and
That's
bullpen.
A good point. Yeah.
And now the question is, all right, we're trying to win a World Series here, and we got 2 pitchers that are pitching like frontline guys. We feel good about where David Peterson is. Clay Holmes, we'll see kind of how that role evolves as we get through the end of the season and into the playoffs. But I would be a little more aggressive in trying to get a real good center fielder if possible. I don't know if you shop at like the tippy top of the bullpen market, but maybe you don't shop at the bottom of it. You shop like in the middle to upper middle tier to build a more well-rounded pen, because look, this is a team, they made the NLCS last year. We've said this on the show, right? The expectation are now you're trying to make the World Series. You're not trying to just get back to where you did last year. And if you're able to get the impact internally that you were hoping for when you gave Sean Manaea $25 million a year, when you brought Kodai Senga back from injury, when you brought Jesse Winker back into the fold, I think that would be maybe a little more prudent for Stearns to maybe not slam the gas pedal to the ground, but definitely go above the speed limit at the trade deadline.
And I'll say this, Joe, this is my old man take of the show, that in theory, like, really means nothing, but it for some reason matters to me. I want the Mets to win the division this year. I want the Mets to win this division this year. I want to celebrate the Mets winning the division this year. And you're 100% right. What matters is, ultimately, you're probably going to see the Dodgers if you make it to the NLCS. And until you beat them and get to the World Series, the goal is not accomplished, right? But to me, I would like to see the Mets gain some momentum in the second half and have a division banner. I really, really would. And that might mean nothing to some people, but I think, to me, I would like to see the Mets start to make that a habit going forward. And I think that if, as Jordan listed, if all of those things are rolling, it only should enhance your mindset to improve the roster in those areas, rather than saying, hey, it's just not our year, right? We're down multiple starting pitchers. We have nothing at catcher. We don't have enough at DH. We can make 2 additions, but unless we make 5 or 6, which is literally not possible the way the MLB deadline is structured anymore, we just don't have enough unless we catch some kind of magic. So, Yeah, I sign off on that all the way. I'm with you that if you got, honestly, the number to me is 3 of those 4. If Minaya and Senga are back and one of Winker or Alvarez is performing to the expectations, then I would be. We use all in loosely about the deadline with the Mets because some people might say all in and think that you're trading Jet Williams, Brandon Sproat, and Nolan McLean to get a top starting pitcher at the deadline. That's not all in to me. All in to me, though, would be significantly boosting this bullpen and getting an everyday center fielder because that's not going to be cheap, Joe.
No, the bullpen especially. I think center field, if you're able to operate within the confines of the rental market, those don't typically go for really big returns. But if you wanted to take that big swing, say, we talked about Byron Buxton on last week's show. If Minnesota falls out of it and decides they're willing to listen on that one would come with a big price tag. And that's why you have to be measured but aggressive in the bullpen, because we saw what San Diego did with Tanner Scott and Jason Adam last year. I really don't want the Mets to do that. But I think now is the time where you look at it, because if you think back to last year, I'm sure if you put some truth serum into David Stearns and the Mets front office, they knew that they needed to buy and help fortify the team. But I don't think even the Mets thought they were going to be in the National League Championship Series last year. And that was evident by their plan in the offseason, the last winter. So I'd like to see a step up in the bullpen rather than, Ryan Stanek was great for the Mets and Phil Maton was useful for the Mets. But I'd like to see them get a little more solidified in that bullpen.
This is the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Taking a Cadillac is more than just taking a drive. Discover which Cadillac is right for you and elevate every journey. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer. And of course, remember to subscribe to the show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review with a question. Of course, we'll look for it for a future mailbag, as you heard today. And of course, you can watch every episode on SMY's YouTube channel. Become a subscriber over there as well. Thanks so much, everyone. Catch you next week.